Hi ladies, it's Mr. O'Sullivan. Today we're going to be looking at a brand new skill that we covered during Regents review, and that's called linear regression. This is a very, very important skill because it pops up every single year on the Regents, and it's a very big question where you can get yourself 4 points by answering the whole thing correctly. And here's the nice thing, you can actually use your calculator to solve the whole problem. So today's learning target is, I can perform a linear regression on a data set by using my calculator. So what a linear regression is it basically is looking at a data set and it creates an equation for you. So you don't have to do anything by hand. Your calculator does all the work for you. Now, when we're doing linear regression, what we're doing is we're creating the line of best fit. Now, the line of best fit is used to predict the relationship or correlation of the data. The correlation coefficient on your calculator can also tell you how good the correlation is. We're going to go over what that means. So here are a bunch of different relationships. This is positive and perfect because if you look, I can draw a perfect line going through all my data and it's increasing. If I look here, my data is very close together. So I can also draw a line going through it pretty perfectly. And it's positive as well because it's increasing. Here, there's a positive correlation because my data set's increasing, but it's a little spread out. No correlation whatsoever. As you can see, I'm decreasing. Then it gets stronger and it decreases, and then it's perfect and it decreases. So here are the calculator instructions, just giving you a heads up. If you're using Calculate 4, your diagnostics are already on. We're going to go over what diagnostics are. They basically help you find out what your correlation coefficient is. And when you take the Regents, just giving you a heads up, all your calculators will have their diagnostics on to begin with, so no worries. This has to be done once your calculator's been cleared, so second mem 712. The first thing you do is, I can't really do it on here because your diagnostics on Calculate 4 are already on, but I can show you using the graphing calculator on the Apple TV. So what you do is you would hit second, then 0, so like second 0, and it brings you to this catalog of a bunch of things. And it's just a bunch of things your calculator can do for you. You then press the letter D, and eventually you would see diagnostics on here, but since I'm using my Calculate 4, you can't see the diagnostics. And then once you get to your diagnostics, you hit enter, and then boom, you're there. Then it's very straightforward from there. It's literally just typing in information and then doing these commands. The big thing, though, is that the correlation coefficient is the R value, so it is not R squared. So R squared is not your correlation coefficient, it is your R value. Now, something that's very, very important, the closer R is to 1 or -1, the stronger the correlation. So you really want that number to be extremely close to 1 or extremely close to -1. If it's close to 1, it will be a positive correlation. If it is close to -1, it will be a negative correlation. So one thing we can do is we can model bivariate data. That's basically just looking at data in 2 ways that have been graphed on a scatter plot. Now, we're not going to worry about graphing on a scatter plot because that's something you would have done in middle school. But what we're going to do is we're going to see how we can use calculators to find the equation of the line of best fit. And as I mentioned before, this is often referred to as your linear regression. So here's how we do a linear regression. If I look at this exercise, it says a survey was taken of 10 low and high temperatures in Fahrenheit in the month of April to try to establish a relationship between a day's low temperature and high temperatures. Low temperature is X, and then high temperature is Y. So part A says, use your calculator to find the equation of the line of best fit. Round the slope of the line to the nearest hundredth. Now, if I remember, that's 2 decimal places. And the y-intercept to the nearest integer, so that's just a whole number. So let's see how we would do this. If we look, we're going to enter this data into our calculator. The x values are going to go into L1. The y values are going to go into L2. So to do this, I hit the stat key, and then it says click edit. So I'm going to edit my data set. Everything in this class is going to go in L1 and L2. So I'm going to put my x values in L1. So I'm going to do my 26 all the way to 45. And you have to make sure you do each and every single one. So I do 26, 28, 30, 32, 34, 35, 37, 38, 41, and then, made a typo, and then 45. Now, one thing that's crucial is you're going to see I have 10 data points. That means I'm going to have 10 more data points, but they're going to go in L2. So now I click on L2, and I type in my y values now. So 49, 50, 57, 54, 60, 58, 64, 66. Did I make a mistake? 64, 66, 63, and then 72. So if I look, I have all my data nice and easy. So like I have 45, 72, and then I even have 26 and 49. So all my data is nice and perfect. So now what we do is we hit stat again, we scroll to the right, and we scroll down until we see linear regression, which in Calc 8.4 is number 4. I then hit enter, and I keep on hitting enter, and then boom, all this information comes out. So I'm gonna just take a quick screenshot of that and then put it here. That way we can refer to it. 1 second. So if we look, it says use your calculator to find the line of best fit around the slope of the line to the nearest hundredth and the y-intercept to the nearest integer. So if we look, the nice thing about a linear regression is it tells us what your equation needs to look like. It needs to look like y equals ax plus b. So I'm going to write y equals ax plus b. And then I'm going to write down what a is equal to. A is equal to 1.1626. So I'm going to stop here. So a is equal to 1.1626. Now, if I want to round that to the nearest hundredth, that's 2 decimal places. So I draw a line after my 6, look next door, I ask myself, is this 2 bigger than 5 or smaller than 5? It's smaller than 5, so this 6 will stay the same. So my a is really 1.16. Now I need to round my b value to the nearest integer, or in this case, my y-intercept. If I look, my b value is 19.07. So if I ask myself how I'd round the nearest integer, I have to ask myself, is 19.07 closer to 19 or is it closer to 20? It's closer to 19. So my b value is equal to 19. So my equation would be y equals, my a value is 1.16, x plus, and then my y-intercept or my b value of 19. And that would be my equation. And you do that every single time. It's always going to ask you to write your equation. It might ask you to round a little differently, but it's always going to ask you to write your equation. Now, part B says, explain what the y-intercept and slope represent in this scenario. So if I look, my y-intercept is basically telling me my initial value. So if I'm telling you that my y-intercept is 19, that's basically telling you that my temperature was initially 19 degrees. Or my initial high temperature was 19 degrees, because that's a y value. Initial high temperature of 19 degrees. And then my, what is it called? My slope is 1.16. That's basically telling me that my temperature is increasing at a rate of 1.16 degrees per day. Increasing per day. So you really need to make sure that you're looking at the table of values and the situation to see what's really going on. And then state the correlation coefficient. Now remember, that is your R value. It's not your R squared, it's your R value. So when I look at my correlation coefficient, I'm going to round this one to the nearest hundredth. So we're going to round this one to the nearest hundredth. If we look, it's 0.9477. So if I round this nearest hundredth, look next door, that 4 is going to turn into a 5, so 0.95. So my R value is 0.95. Now, that number is very close to 1, so that means there's going to be a pretty strong positive correlation for this data set, which would make sense because if you look, your data is increasing as time goes on. So that is your first Regents review lesson, and it is such a crucial one, so please make sure that you know how to do this on the calculator perfectly. This is the first question you should do.